did pass on Kanye.
You see a lot of big artists too. They kind of come out and they're like, Atlantic or whatever, like, get me out of this deal.
You're an artist, right? And you're creative. You may never have a hit record, but I can help you make $400,000 or $500,000 a year. Are you cool with that? You can do that independently. Turn around and say, ask the same artist, hey, you might not own your masters, but I could help you make maybe $5 million a year in touring. Are you cool with that?
All right, Money Talks. We got Ben Willis today.
I'm here. What's up? Jesse, my dog.
You want to give a quick intro yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ben Willis. I am a serial entrepreneur, but in the best way possible. Usually when I start projects, I finish them or get them to completion. I've been in the music business for over 25 years now. I grew up in Delaware. Then at 18, moved to New York City and have been in LA now since 2008. So 15 years? Yeah, 15 years. But yeah, man, that's it. I'm a music guy and an entrepreneur. I actually was joking with my girlfriend the other day. We were going to a New Year's Eve party. And we were driving over there and I was like, yo, when people ask me what I do, I'm just going to introduce myself as a businessman now.
That's good. I like that.
She was like, that's so whack.
I'm a businessman.
She's like, so like if someone asks you like, what do you do? I'm just going to be like, I'm a businessman. Because like when you're in the music business, we kind of were talking about this, about like music managers and like agents and shit. You kind of get a bad rap. Like you're kind of like a fast talking kind of seedy dude, like in the back of an alley, making deals, you know?
Slick back hair.
Yeah, slick back hair. So I figured if I'm just like, I'm just an international businessman. I do business all over the world. But then that kind of makes it more mysterious. I don't know.
I always hated the word entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think because like growing up, like it was just sort of like people would say, everyone kind of like puts entrepreneur in their bio type thing. And then like 1 out of 10 are really what the actual definition of it is.
Yes.
So I'd always avoid it, but then it's like that kind of just like is what it is sometimes, you know?
You are. I mean, you are an entrepreneur. I mean, it's at least it's like, I mean, the whole like, social media and the whole thing, specifically with like Twitter and Instagram, you have a bio. And one thing that fools always joke about is like creative director. Like everyone has creative director.
Yeah.
Or if you're a music A&R.
CEO.
Yeah, or CEO. I mean, do people even know what CEO is? Like, what that even means? What that job actually entails? It's actually kind of like, it's interesting because you can take that role on and might not know what it is.
True.
It could put you in a bad place,
And what's funny about bios too, it's like there's a perfect amount where it's like if you have too little, it's kind of like, all right, who is this guy? Is he legit?
Yes.
And if you have too much, it's like, he's trying too hard, like owner of, and then there's like 50 tags.
Yeah.
And people, there's a real thing like bio curation, I'm sure there's bio consultants of being like, no, put 2 things, put 3 things.
There has to be. I started out as a radio promo guy. So I dealt with every urban and rhythm radio station in America, and you'd go all across America and like try to get records played on the radio. That was my job. And you'd come across people that were like talent managers, so they would manage artists, models, have a clothing line. Like that was the thing back in the day. Like you had to have like a clothing line. You had to also manage artists, but you probably were a promo guy, and you also had like a nightclub maybe. So it was like
That's
really
the flywheel.
It was like really turned up. And the thing is like you couldn't really check on people to see if it was legit.
Different than now. True.
Now real quick, what's really going on.
I think it's funny too when people have like, previously Apple, Google, whatever it is, and it's like if you're putting that much emphasis on what you used to do, then like is what you're doing really that?
Yeah, it's full on cap.
Anyway, that's a good segue. I was gonna say, like, you've been in the music business for 25 years.
Yeah.
That's different than a lot of people I talk to.
Yeah.
A little bit older, but not too old.
Yeah.
But like
I try to stay young.
So you said how you kind of got started which is crazy because it's so different. Like the things that you were even like considering doing back then is so different than now. Like, so you worked for a company when you started?
I could tell you the story. It's actually really funny. So I have like a ton of stories.
I'm sure. The more years, the more stories.
Yeah, the more years, the more stories. And it kind of piles up like that, actually. Now, like, I have to actually think about specific, like, time frames, like certain years. More so not certain years, but certain, like, segments, you know what I'm saying? Like, from, like, 96 to 2000 or 2000. Because all those things, pop culture changes. You find yourself either doing the same thing, but maybe in different scenarios. But I grew up in Delaware, and as a kid, you know, I made beats and I learned how to DJ. That's like what I did. I'd literally sit in my basement, make beats as much as humanly possible. I realized in like 10th grade I wasn't going to be a professional football, baseball, basketball player. I played sports like my whole life. And I realized, like, okay, this is like, I'm not going to be that dude. I'm like, okay at sports. I could play, you know what I mean? But like, I'm not going to go to college. I'm not going to go on a scholarship. And I really got into making beats probably like in 9th grade. And so I started to do that, and I started a record collection. I started DJing, and I wasn't like a club DJ, but I was more of a battle DJ. So I could like really scratch and like I could do like tricks and all that. I would watch all the
kids these days don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
like,
no,
what?
I mean some, you know, like when A-Track goes on like line and does like a set, and fools are like, oh my God, like he's been doing that shit since he was like literally 8 years old. Like, you know. Yeah. He's like a hometown hero from like, is he from Quebec?
He's from Montreal. I
yeah.
think. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
So that's,
I mean, he's a legend. We were watching him on DMC battles at like 8 or 9, like just smashing fools. So I came up like DJing, and part of that was like University of Delaware had a local radio station called WVUD. And if you were good, you could get a spot. So I would guest DJ at WVUD sometimes. And this is like pretty interesting how this all happened. So I learned at like really young age that you could call record labels and be like, hey, I'm a DJ at WVUD. Will you put me on your record list? And they would put you on a record list, and they'd send you vinyl of all the new music. Because college radio at that time, select colleges are still pretty big. But at that time, if you weren't on commercial radio, you were on college radio, and you were like popping, right? Like if your records got played, you could chart, and like as an artist, you could be pretty successful. And so I kind of just like tricked the system, and I call every single record label. And there's like legendary dudes that probably don't even know it that I would call, like, you know, a guy named Chris Atlas, who's like, you know, pretty much a legend. Mike Caron, another legend. Like they don't even know that I, as like a little Ben at like, you know, in 10th grade, would be like, hey, I'm DJ Massey and I'm at WVUD, full on lying. I would like guessed, but they'd send me vinyl. So what I did was whatever. So when I moved to New York City.
That was your artist name? DJ Massey?
Yeah, that was my DJ name.
Isn't that your daughter's name?
That's my daughter's name. So my middle name is Massey. My grandmother's maiden name was Massey, so it kind of carries.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So the name keeps going.
The name keeps going. And so, yeah, so I sort of garnered all these relationships. And this is, it's really interesting that like, if you take a look at your life as a kid and where you end up as an adult, there's a lot of things that connect, right? At a really early age, I was really good at cold calling people and being like, hey, my first job was like a telemarketer for accidental death insurance. So I would call people like 16 years old and be like, hey, you know, it's probably a really good idea that if you fall down the steps, your spouse falls down the steps, you have this accidental death, and people would buy things. So I was like really good at it. And so that kind of led into like, you know, okay, I'm calling all these record promo guys, getting vinyl sent to me. So I established some relationships. So when I moved to New York City, you know, I one day was making the rounds, and I was going to introduce myself to all the people that I had been calling for years. And I walked into, at the time, which was WEA, Warner, Elektra, and Atlantic Records. It was like a conglomerate. It was like those three labels together. And there was a guy named Big Phil. And Big Phil's a legend, but he worked for a record label called Street Life Records. Street Life Records was Eric B from Eric B and Rakim's like label. It was like his vanity label, right? Distributed through WEA. And I walk into Big Phil. Big Phil's like big. He's not Big Phil because he's small. He was like maybe 6'1", 6'2", 350, 400-pound man in like in an office that's really small. And he's like sitting back on his chair. And I go in and I'm like, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah. and he's like, yeah, here. And Craig Mack had just signed to Street Life. He had his record with Bad Boy, left Bad Boy, and signed with Street Life. And Phil was like, I go get the vinyl, gives me the vinyl, and he's like, do you want an internship? And I was like, well, what do you do? And he was like, radio promo. And I was like, well, what's that? And he's like, this is what it is. And 2 weeks later, I was on like an East Coast tour with Craig Mack, KRS-One, Puff Daddy, Biggie, The Lox, Mace.
Crazy.
And that was my entry point into the music business. So I like went to go get vinyl, left with an internship, and 2 weeks later I was like fully on the road. And that's the way it happened back in the day.
So you accidentally went from like artist side to like the business side. It was just like, okay, I could do that. And then you fell in. Was there a point when you were like, okay, I'm really gonna, I mean, you still do do music, but where you were like, my career is gonna be the business side, like, was it like a motivation of like, I want to make money and this is how an easier path?
It was actually like kind of an accidental thing. So like, after my internship at Street Life, I was there for maybe a couple of months and I was like, okay, like any kid, I'm like broke as fuck and I'm like living in New York City. I'm working like 3 jobs just to pay rent and going to like audio engineering school part-time. And then I realized I didn't want to do that. So I went full on into, Phil was a radio promoter. That's how I learned about radio promo. And my friend calls me and goes, hey, there's this record label called Raucous Records. They're kind of like a newer label. They have an artist named Mos Def, an artist named Talib Kweli. And I was like, oh, I know Mos Def. Like, I mean, I loved his music, And they're like, they need a radio guy. And I'm like, sick. They knew nothing about radio. I knew 6 months about radio. You know what I mean? Like I was an expert already, but these dudes were not experts at all. They just were like, we can't get our records played on Hot 97. Can you get our records played on Hot 97?
Sounds like now with TikTok. It's like labels being like, what do we do for TikTok?
What do we do? Like, how do we
hire this 17-year-old kid who's going to know more than
that's literally, bro. And I'll tell you the story.
Parallels are funny.
I'll tell you how I got hired at Raucous. So I like go over there. I'm like working part-time there, doing like mix show promo stuff. And I go to my boss, who I'm still very, very, very close friends with to this day, a guy named Jarrett Meyer. Jarrett runs Uprocks, which is like one of the biggest websites in the world and like media companies. And he goes, so I go to him and his partner, Brian's office, and I'm like, yo, I have to get paid now. Like, I'm working 3 jobs. I'm coming here part-time. I need to get paid. And they're like, okay. How much do you need a year? And I was like, if I could get $25,000 a year, that would make me like, I could pay for my rent in Queens, which was like an hour and a half away from fucking the city. And they're like, okay, here's the deal. We had this single called Body Rock. It's Mos Def, Tash from the Alcoholics, and Q-Tip. If you can go to Hot 97 tonight and get Funk Flex to play it, we'll hire you. I'm like, done deal, bro. Coincidentally, I had been going to Hot 97 for months anyway, just hitting up Enough, hitting up Red Alert, hitting up Flex. So I kind of had these like fun relationships with them. And the receptionists loved me at Hot 97. So that's how it was. When you were back in the day, you would make friends with the receptionist at the radio station. Then they'd let you in the back if you didn't have a meeting, and you'd go fill the record boxes with vinyl. So I'm like, yo, I need to go see Flex. She's like, come on. I go, and Flex is on the air, mind you, right? He goes on at 7:00. Even to this day, he still DJs. I mean, it's like, I actually Googled how old he is. He's like 54, 55. Mind blown that he's still at Hot 97. I haven't talked to him for years. And so like, I go to Flex and I'm like, listen, I have this record. I really need you to play it tonight. But I wasn't like, I need you to play it because if you do, I didn't do any of that. I was like, it's Mos Def, it's Q-Tip, and it's Tash from Alcohol. I'm like, this is a jam, but I like need you to play it like for real. He's like, yeah, put it over there. I'm like, okay, cool. Peace. Go back to my crib in Queens. Turn the radio on, and there, from 7 to 10 was like program, right? So whatever was on the playlist, and 10 to 12 was the mix show, so he could play whatever he wanted to play it, from 10 to 12. So I'm like sitting there next to my radio, and I'm like, okay, man, I'm like taking this as serious as like cancer. Like if he plays this, I'm like on. I get a salary, I get benefits, and I have like I'm at a record
Pivotal
label.
for
like
you.
It's like a huge moment for me. So I say my prayer, whatever the fuck, and I'm sitting there, me and my homie are sitting there listening to the radio. 10 o'clock comes, nothing. 10:30 comes, nothing. 11 o'clock comes, nothing. 11:30 comes, nothing. 11:40, nothing. 11:45, nothing. I'm starting to get hella sad. And at 11:50, like 10 minutes left, he like stops the music and he's like, I got this new record by Mos Def, Tash from the Alcoholics and Q-Tip, Body Rock. Blows the air horn, plays it. Runs it back, plays it, runs it back, plays it. And then he plays a Talib Kweli record. Kwa was a part of a group called Reflection Eternal at the time. Then he plays that record. I didn't even ask him to play it. I go on the label the next day. I'm like, yo. And they're like, you're hired. And that's how I got my job.
That's how I got
cool.
my first, that's really cool.
My first job.
I feel like that still applies. Like the same 100%. Kind of thing. You just do something for someone. You know, I've seen that now too. It's like, like all kinds of like new skills, even like the TikTok stuff and the video editing and that stuff. Like people are just like, hey, let me just edit a video for you. You see my style. Let me show you how I do it. And then it's much easier to hire them.
Well, you have to be a value add, right? Like you can't say like, you know, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you just have to do it.
Especially for a job like that everyone wants. That's like a cool
bro, it's like,
New
it's
York
like
or LA job, you know?
And it's a niche job. It's like, no, you know, to this day, like people are so like, how do record, people don't know how records get played on the radio.
Yeah.
I went to like a master course in that, and I learned from a group of guys that like did everything kind of the wrong way. You know what I mean? And I learned how not to do things. And we're like, what I came up, you know, and I'm very grateful for like Big Phil and a guy named Chris Thomas. And these guys like took me under their wing, and I learned the good things about the music business and the bad things. And I just learned that really, if you're just nice to people, you have to have a good product.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're really nice to people, they're at one point they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
But you got to keep knocking. It's not just going to come right there, you know?
So how would you say like today, because I don't really know, how do records blow up, get on the radio? Like the hits that we hear, like even though radio is kind of like an old school thing, it's still a thing, right? And it's still like the most mainstream, biggest songs end up on the radio, and those are the ones you hear in restaurants and, you know, wherever you go. So how does that even happen?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is like when I started radio, which is, I guess, as a profession in 96, you know, which is like so long ago, you know, that was what it was. It was like the holy grail. It was like MTV, BET, and the radio. And if you got on either one of those formats, you'd pop off. The interesting thing about nowadays, as far as radio is concerned, is radio truly is, in my opinion, and I kind of went through this. I got this experience firsthand. Was like, you know, as I started in the radio in mid 2000s, everyone was like, radio's dead. The it's the uprising of the internet, but like there was internet radio and fools were like, this shit is fully capped. Like it sucks. It's worse than college radio. But when streaming really came in, I'd say I really got put onto like Spotify in like 2010, 2011, maybe. And by 2016, it was just full on. And so, you know, part of my career and to this day is I run a music management company called Indie Pop, and Indie Pop looks after some really great clients. And one of our clients is Super Duper Kyle. And this is like a really important moment for my sort of like to answer this question, right? Like radio still plays a role in being a part of an artist's story. I don't think it breaks music anymore. And the moment I recognized that was when Kyle's record, I Spy, really, really blew up on Spotify, and we have to credit Spotify for that because they really did that. A guy named Tuma Basa, who was running Rap Caviar at the time, put Kyle's record on as the #2 song in Rap Caviar, and it literally went from like, you know, maybe a couple thousand streams.
So playlisting, that's still huge, right?
It's the biggest thing. So here's the interesting thing: when that record was streaming, probably like, I don't know, it was going 100, 200, 300,000 streams a day. Before we ever did a deal with Atlantic, we did a joint venture at that time. That record was gold. It wasn't on the radio, and it had millions of streams. So when Atlantic took it to radio, radio supported. So we were able to achieve a really big feat for an independent artist, a gold record going into a major label negotiating a deal, and radio wasn't even a part of that story. So for me, my history was a radio promo guy for all these years. My mind was blown because I was like, oh, it's for real. It's over.
Yeah.
And so I don't listen to the radio anymore.
Yeah.
Radio's fully capped. Like you wait, I gotta wait for you to play something that I might like.
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, it's cool when there's like undeniable changes that happen.
Yeah.
Because I feel like every few years there's new technology, the Web3 stuff now. Yeah. But it's like that moment where it just goes from like people trying to push it as like, hey, there's this new thing, streaming. Like I remember like 2014, 2015, even maybe a little earlier, friends being like, yo, you should get like Spotify. And I was still downloading music from like hip hop blogs and albums and putting it on iTunes.
That was also big then too.
Yeah. And to make that switch, there needs to be so much value for like the consumer to where it's like, this literally doesn't make sense anymore. You know, $10 a month and all my albums are here and I save all this time. And it's so interesting when things are that good that it happens.
Yeah.
I feel like Web3 is happening the last couple of years. It hasn't hit that point yet where it's enough value to, and I'm like really into the Web3 stuff and NFT, early NFT collector, but like, it's still when you're talking to someone who's not, to be like, to try and convince them like, hey, this is something that you should be doing or listening to music this way. Like, I don't see it yet. No. Do you see like a point where that will happen or is it not Web3, something else? Like,
I don't know, man. I mean, I'm heavily invested in Web3. You know, I'm a collector of Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that kind of got into that, somewhat early. But, we have a Web3 company called Wagme Beach, and, we've dropped a really successful NFT collection called the Catalina Whale Mixer on Solana. And so, I'm like I'm not the most educated, right? On the scale of 1 to 10 in that space, I'm probably at like a 7 or 8. There's people that are way smarter than me, people that are not as smart as me in that space. But I think the access is still, it needs to be easier. You could lose your whole bag by just pressing the wrong button. And so, which you can get scammed. I mean, I've been scammed, what I'm saying? I've lost Bitcoin because I just like, I send it to the wrong, what I mean? And so, here's the thing. It's kind of like, and I don't want to get too deep into this because it gets really freaky, but like when fools want to live in a world where there's no rules, right? Like on the blockchain, when you lose your bag, then you want the rules, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to call Chase and be like,
I wired it to the wrong person.
And then they say, cool, no problem. They reverse it, but you can't do that on the blockchain. So I think there's beauty in that, but I also think that there's a huge learning curve, and the the checks and balances to get into that is still being worked through. You know what I mean? So it's not as easy as what people think. And I also think it's actually really funny, man, because Nolan, who you just had on the podcast, who's our co-manager on Kyle, I remember when me and Nolan had a conversation about the dollar versus Bitcoin. And it took me a minute to wrap my head around the fact that there could be an alternate currency outside of the USD, because I'm so, right, I'm advanced, right? I would say I'm kind of advanced. And it took me a minute to wrap my head around the fact that like, holy shit, maybe USD is going to be obsolete and maybe we are going to go to this other form of currency. And it just really took me, maybe it was an emotional connection or whatever. It really fucked me up. You know what I'm saying? To even think that. So to answer it's probably a long-winded way to answer your question. I think we're going to get there. I just don't think we're there yet. I think cryptocurrency, I think Web3 is still a really small segment. It produces a ton of money for sure. But I think, when you're talking about like Bob and Jack and Jill and fucking, the Midwest that aren't as educated or they just don't give a fuck, trying to, it's like the same concept of trying to get people to stop downloading music and stream music. It took a long time for Apple Music to get to that place. And they're the biggest company, one of the biggest companies in the world.
That's how I felt. Like it had to weigh so heavily that it was like, it's undeniable. And it's like, this is so much better and cheaper, accessible, whatever, before that switch happens, It
almost has to you almost have to take it away from people.
Yeah. People's behaviors, like it's very hard to change behavior,
I mean, think about this just for a second, right? Like New Year comes, new year, new me. I want to eat better. I want to work out more, but I really like sweets.
Sounds like me.
How do I change that behavior? The thing is, it's a psychological thing. People are like, people that are overweight, people that can't control their weight, you know, it's not about the food. It's about what is so deep rooted that you continue to self-sabotage all the time. So changing behaviors, it's just not just like, hey, listen, fat ass, don't eat fucking, instead of eating the whole pizza, eat like 2 slices. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
It's about what goes it's about what goes into that thinking. And like, I'm the king of self-sabotage, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll get right to the finish line, but like, as much success as I've had, I feel comfortable sometimes, in self-sabotaging. It's just what I do it now. I know what I'm doing, you know what I mean? But for years you're like, I wonder why that thing didn't happen. You know what I'm saying? So it is interesting. So for people to change their behaviors, it's a life-changing concept.
Yeah. It's funny, like even things like, I think we're on the verge of another like big shift with all the AI stuff. And
which is like really scary. That's another one. It's too fast. I
don't think people are going to be on their phones, and especially on like laptops in a few years. I think because it's going to be like, why do we have the phone and the computer and the mouse and all these things? It's to interact with the technology, and we don't need that anymore because you can interact straight with AI like Neuralink, things like that are coming. And so I think we're on the verge of another huge shift. But even small things, like for me, like I use Apple Notes and Apple Reminders apps, and I know that like Notion is better, but the behavior, like I guess I don't see enough value that my subconscious mind is like, I need to switch and like move everything over and start my behavior there. And it's like, I see now why like my dad, it was hard to like use email, you know, and like where it's like, come on, just use it. It's better. But it's like your behaviors, the longer you do things, you're so set in stone.
Yeah.
And that's like definitely like, I was like, if I was 18 right now, I wouldn't be using Apple Notes. I'd be using Notion. But it's like, I've been doing it so many years. I have this repeating thing. It's hard to break,
Dude, it is. It's like, it was when I pulled up, I was like, wait, were me and you DMing or were we texting? So I had to go through my DMs and then even, you know what I mean? Even something so simple as that. So then you like, you start doing business with a new client or a new company, and they're like, well, everything's on Slack over here. So can you get on Slack? And I'm like, oh, okay. And then some fools are like, well, I'm on Notion. I'm like, well, can you motherfuckers just send me an email? Like, is that cool? And it's like, nah, like, so I feel you on that.
We just touched on a little bit everything you do, but like, so Ben started in the music industry, founded Indie Pop as the management, or?
Yeah. So Indie Pop. So when we started Indie Pop, it wasn't management. I can kind of tell the story behind it.
Yeah. I was just going to say give a little, because we got into it right away. Sure. I was just going to go, your partner, Indie Pop Management, Independent Records, Wagme Beach, Catalina Whales, super popular NFT project on Solana. So you've been in the, I would say like to encompass all that, it's like you've been in the music industry all the way from like pushing records on radio to like managing artists internationally, starting an independent record label, working with major labels, and now the Web3 thing. And you guys are huge players in the Web3 space. We might cut that back to the beginning just to give everyone like this is Ben and what he does.
But that's like that weird bio. If I put it on my Instagram, I'd look like hella crazy.
Yeah. But
I do though, so fuck it.
But it's even bigger flex. Back to the bio, they just be like, whatever, right? And you run a jujitsu school.
Yes.
You were just telling me, I didn't even know that. And it's like, it's just like so cool when it's like, man, like someone like you, so successful in music, so many different things, and you're like, oh yeah, but I also just teach jujitsu like 3 times a week, and like it's like, what? So okay, but to kind of skip from your story before to starting your management company and record label, how'd you like start your own business? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, I want to be in music, I want to manage artists, but it's like there's a big disconnect. Even for me, I'm like tapped in with music business stuff, and I'm always like, how can I like involve myself in different music businesses or start something?
That's a really good question. I was actually thinking about that on the way over here. I was thinking about, so when I started Indie Pop, there's 3 of us. There's 3 founders. It's me, my friend Josh, and Carlo. And so basically, I had spent, in 2008 is when sort of Indie Pop came to fruition. It was just an idea. I had spent 12 years in the music business before that, though, as a radio promo guy. And I got to the place where like, you know, I was a part of Raucous Records, which was like really iconic. I made a brief stop at Rockefeller, and I helped with, you know, the launch of Kanye's first 2 albums at radio. And like, so I was able to be a part of these like
That's crazy.
really cool things.
What kind of things were you working on like for Kanye's albums?
Well, just mostly just taking, like we took Through the Wire to radio, and which was like, you know, he had his accident and he made this song, and it came to us, you know, after Raucous was over, and which was like 2003, 2004, I was doing a lot of independent work, and one of the accounts I worked on was Rockefeller, and then eventually I was able to work in the office for maybe about a year or whatever. But yeah, taking those records to radio, because at that time Kanye was like a producer still, so like a lot of people didn't really believe in his music as an artist. And in fact,
I'm sure you watched the documentary.
Yeah, I mean, Raucous did pass. We did pass on Kanye because we had Mos and we had Kweli and we had Pharoah Monch. But if Kanye would have came to Raucous, he probably wouldn't be the person he is today, right? Like being a part of the Rock was like a legendary thing, and he got to be with all these guys that were like, I mean, they're iconic, right?
Was it cool for you to watch the documentary? Because you were like there.
It was cool. I mean, it was really cool. It was really cool because there were so many moments I was so close to it. That because, you know, Kanye produced a record for Talib Kweli called Get By, which is one of Kweli's biggest records at radio.
I love that song back in the day.
And so, I mean, I remember one time, you know, when The Beat was a thing here in LA, Kweli was doing a show for The Beat, and we went and picked Kanye up from his hotel, and they all came to the show with us. And this was like pre-Kanye ever blowing up. You know, I mean, he's always been a sick producer. Anyway, so I spent all this time doing this radio promo stuff. And so toward, you know, after probably like 2005, 2006, I was just doing it independently. And, you know, a lot of those accounts were major label accounts, but a lot of them were dope boy accounts, right? So if it was come to you with 100 grand, 50 racks, cash, they'd be like, can you get my record on the radio? And I'd be like, yeah, of course. But you knew the records weren't going to be successful. So what started happening with...
Is that how a lot of music gets funded? It's sort of like...
Well, when people are starting out, if they don't have a major label deal, it's self-funded.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you know...
So they might know people in the community who have cash for various reasons.
Correct.
And that's a good way for people to spend actual cash.
Yes.
Because you can't like take physical cash and do a lot of things, but you can pay off people to blow up a record.
Totally. So you
super
can do
interesting.
It is. It gets really the, you know, the dark, deep web of like radio promo and those businesses are like pretty crazy. I'm not sure it's like that these days. Everything's pretty buttoned up, you know what I mean? But it was a Wild West back then anyways. And so what I started to realize is like, okay, boom, you know, I worked with some really iconic artists in my life. But like, I don't want to be a radio promo guy like forever. And you know, in the early 2000s, I started to feel and see the demise of radio. You know what I'm saying? Like I started being like, something's going to happen. So what do I like to do? Well, I really like to develop artists, and I really like working with artists. One of my favorite things to this day is like the first time your record gets played on the radio, or the first time your client's record is on a big playlist, right? Because that's the equivalent now, right?
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, it's like this validation that you believed in something so early, and now it's becoming successful and people are recognizing it. It's arguably one of my most favorite times, besides the client actually making money, right? Because making money with your client is like extremely hard, right? So like you're making this art, and hopefully people are gonna like pay you money to see you perform or whatever the fuck. So I had like probably in 2006 taken some time off for work. My daughter was born in 2005, and I had like a house in upstate New York. I was still living in New York, and so I spent some time up there. And I was like, okay, like what do I want to do next? And so, yeah, I was like, I want to start a company called Indie Pop, which is short for independently popular. And the idea initially was to be able to create a roster of artists that resonated with me the way Raucous did, but had the commercial viability that Rockefeller did, right? Raucous at the height of it had some really good commercial records, but Rockefeller was like, I mean, it was Jay-Z, it was Kanye West, it was like the most iconic artist of all time. And so that's where Indie Pop started from. My partner, who I founded the company with, a guy named Joshua Andriano. I met him through my ex-wife's sister. So we actually dated and were married to sisters at one point.
That's funny.
Which was like insane. And and so Josh was just finishing law school. And so the idea was like, okay, cool, I have all this experience in music. Josh, you're an attorney. boom, let's start this company. And that's how it started. In the first act we signed was the Cataracts, a group called the Cataracts and a girl called Dev. And so, and a guy named Bobby Brackens, who I can never forget because he gave us our first hit record.
I remember that name.
Yeah, 143. He had a record called 143. Bob, big shout out to Bob. He's a fucking legend. He's went on to write a lot of huge records since then. But I was, to your point, I had spent already 12 years in the music business, established a ton of relationships.
I'm sorry, that was management that you started with?
So when we started, we were signing artists to deals. So there were 360 deals. It was publishing, it was masters. And
you want to break down how that works, actually? Because that's interesting.
Yeah. So when you decide to develop an artist, it's called production deal. Mm-hmm. It's a bad word. It's pretty much,
I know that's like when I signed to you, you own 50% of my LLC, everything I do.
Yeah,
it's like you're a partner.
We're basically creating a partnership. Mm-hmm. But you're usually creating a partnership with artists that still live at home, right? So like a lot of the artists we worked with, they literally like the Cataracts, big shout out to the Cataracts. We still look after Kashmir, who's one of the biggest DJs in the world, which was one half of the Cataracts. We started working with them and eventually moved them to Los Angeles. Same thing with a woman named Dev, who had probably in 2010 and 11 and 12 had some of the biggest records in the country or in the world for that matter. And so it was like, we started to sign them and we would own a portion of their publishing and own a portion of their masters. And so that's a very, depending upon which seat you're sitting in, could be a very compromising. Just because like from my side, it's like I find an artist and I develop them, put all my time and money into them. But for the artist side, it's like, well, you own my masters and my publishing. You're kind of like the devil. So it just depends on who you deal with and how they recognize that partnership.
I think it's funny from an outside perspective because I've never like been directly in the music business, but I talk to a lot of people. It's interesting how like record deals now have such a bad rap, and it's like this idea of like someone owning your masters is evil and all this stuff. Yeah. And I mean, I see how like certain contracts, certain deals can be predatory, but I think there's the other side too, where it's like, if you take a chance on someone and you're like putting your hard-earned money on something that literally has no chance, like, has no value, 1 out of 100 make it. Totally. And so like what happens, you have to own something, right? Yeah, and it's not evil. It's like an investor in a startup,
Yeah. And I've been like really lucky, with all of our clients. We've negotiated out all those deals with our clients and they've all stayed with us for the most part. And like, I think there's like a certain time and a certain place. And a lot of the people we work with, whether it's Kyle or Kashmir or Yuna or like those are clients that we've been with for 13 plus years.
That's
you know
rare.
what I'm saying? They know me. They know who I am as a person. And when they start to blow up, they're just like, hey, I want to negotiate out of this deal. I'm like, okay, great. Let's figure it out. You know what I mean? So I think you do have to be flexible. But yeah, dude, I think that like, when I decided to start this company with our partners, I was so well versed in the music business. It wasn't like today, if I was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to become a Garmento and I want to start like a clothing line, I probably get fucking smashed and probably wouldn't make any money. And you go through a bunch of failures and then you start to make money. I had a little bit of, I had some experience in the music business. I spent 12 years already. So I felt like I was a professional in that business. And so when we decided to start this company, there was people I could call to help. And radio was a big story for us in the beginning because the Cataracts were from the Bay Area. The Bay Area supported all of our music. Big shout out to like Big Vaughn up at KMEL and Travis at Wild and Jay Espinoza and all these guys and DJ E-Rock who like were there to support the Cataracts like super early on. Which the funny thing about the Cataracts, they ended up becoming really successful, songwriters and producers. And, the most notable was they wrote and produced like a G6, which in 2010 was the biggest record in the world that year.
That's what I was going to get to. That was like a big, that you owned that, right?
Yes, we owned a portion of that.
Yeah. And so that was released on Indie Pop
so we had the publishing. Okay. Because we had a joint venture with the Cataracts on the publishing side. And then
publishing, I mean, I know, but maybe, this is like
publishing
something
is separate from masters. So publishing is the writing of the lyric or melody, whereas the master is like the asset that's sold or streamed.
So
right?
So a master is the actual recording that gets played and streams and whatever. Yes. And then the publishing is the creative side. Like I made up this melody, I wrote these words.
Yes.
It's interesting that it's still separate. Like it kind of feels like, you know.
Yeah, it's always confusing to me, even to this day.
Yeah.
You know, I've just had to do so many like different deals with people that it just becomes like, it's like regurgitated because you've read it and talked about it and been a part of it for so long. But yeah, it is an interesting concept that it's separated like that. And whoever thought of that, I guess, was kind of smart because they were able to monetize a bunch of different streams of revenue like that super early on. But like, yeah, man.
So like, you've done like a lot of, because you have management clients, you have independent label clients, you have joint ventures with major labels.
Yeah.
What's the decision making there, and like what's your favorite deal to do or the most common?
Yeah. So I think everyone is different, right? You hear this all the time. It's like such a cliche and so weird, but every artist is their own brand, right? And so some artists, you know, like I'll give an example. I mean, Frank Ocean is always the big example, right? Like all of our clients that are like really cool and tastemaker are like, well, you know, like Frank Ocean doesn't post. It was like Frank Ocean is a different kind of artist that has penetrated pop culture and our society as like one of the most coolest people, intriguing. You can't put Frank is like the only dude that could probably not show up to Coachella for 2 years and still get booked, right?
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But that's like one of one.
Yeah.
You know?
There's like how many artists in the world that have that power?
Not like a lot. So when you're developing an artist, and actually, damn, like Kyle's a really good example. When we put that record out independently, right? We put two albums out independently before he ever did that deal with Atlantic. And when I Spy happened, us as businessmen were like, okay, like before that happened, you know, we had a long-standing, pretty much joint venture with Universal Republic. Great dudes. Love that company.
And so the independent album deal, record deal, what are the economics behind that? Like, is it the same idea? Like, here's an advance, and then we're gonna have a budget for your album, and it's just on a smaller scale. But then,
it's a bunch of different ways, and this will go into the tail end of what the question, right? Which is like, what's better? You know, what's better for an artist? What's better is based upon what the artist is dealing with, and Kyle, when those deals were happening, they were like, you know, 50-50. We put the money up, we split the money 50%. Pretty standard at that time for those types of deals. But, you know, I Spy happened and we were like, okay, can we really service this client to his fullest ability? And the answer was no. So doing a deal with Atlantic for Kyle made all the sense in the world. Kyle is a star. He deserved to do 1,000 brand deals. He deserved to have a #1 record at radio. And us as independent business weren't able to deliver that at that time. So we had to say, yo, let's go do a deal that's going to be beneficial for him and beneficial for us. But really, at the end of the day, what's going to be most beneficial for the art and for the artist to have the maximum exposure? And that was doing a deal for that record.
And that's because that song was already like so big. It was like, this is a mega hit. It's not only a hit, this is a mega.
Yeah, it's like a mega hit. It's like, yo, like I could fool myself by saying, yeah, I could do a good job at rhythm radio or maybe pop radio a little bit, but I'm just playing myself. I'm not taking that record #1 at rhythm radio with an independent team. I might take it top 20.
And what's the difference? The major labels,
well, they just have market share. You know what I'm saying? So Atlantic is walking in the door with whoever at the time. Maybe it's, you know, they're walking into radio right now at like Cardi B, Lizzo, and like the new artist. So do you think the program director is going to say no? Nah, they're going to give the record a shot based upon statistics and if it's good. But they also have the market share and they have the power to say, well, you want like Lizzo for Summer Jam, right? Okay, let's talk about this. So, you know, there's different leverages that these major labels have.
So they use other big artists as leverage. Hey, you want.
I think it's like an unspoken thing.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you want. I mean, the crazy
don't
thing,
upset the big players.
Yeah, exactly. Like, let's make everyone happy. And when it's interesting. When you have a big record, you're going to still be able to leverage that. But I think for Kyle, it was like the perfect thing. And I agree with you. You know what I mean? Like, you take a look at a major label, and if you're a developing artist and you have a partner that could put a lot of money into you and market and promote you early on, and if you become a star, you can leave that deal eventually and then be an independent artist. I think that's like a phenomenal way to take that approach. I also think that, like, if you're an independent artist and you're having success independently, And you're cool. Like here's
different roots.
There's different roots.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are like, look, if you ask anyone, right, and you're like, hey, you're an artist, right, and you're creative, you may never have a hit record, but I can help you make $400,000 or $500,000 a year. Are you cool with that? Most people are going to be like, fuck yes.
Sounds pretty good.
So it's like, and you can do that independently. You can do that without having to sign your masters. And then you can turn around and say, ask the same artist, hey, you might not own your masters, but I could help you make maybe $5 million a year in touring. Are you cool with that? So that's the give and the take, man. And I think that, like, you know, God bless Kanye for going on his rant about masters and all that shit, but he's just said that's setting a bad precedent for the rest of the world, because he's such a unique artist that has had so much success. Like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You see a lot of big artists too. They kind of come out and they're like, fuck Atlantic or whatever, like, get me out of this deal. Why? And it's like, I mean, I get, once you're already so big, you have so much money, and like, yeah, of course you don't want to work with someone who's like telling you what to do and owning your stuff, but like, you got there because, you know, you might not be there without starting with that. So I see both sides, you know.
No, I do too, and I live in that world on both sides all the time. And I think it's like, if you find a good partner, there's a give and a take. It's like, dog, I'm not gonna, like, as a music manager, if I put that hat on, if you come to me, Jesse, and you're like, yo, I'm really about it and I make slap, I'm like, sick. So you want me to manage you, right? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. So now for the next 3 years, probably I'll make no money. I'm going to spend time away from my partner and from my daughter to serve you, to make you the biggest artist in the world. There has to be a good exchange there. And it's like, that's real, and that's okay.
Yeah. I managed an artist for a little bit a few years ago, and I remember thinking that too, like, of all the businesses I've tried and stuff, like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, it's not that you can't be successful.
Yeah, totally.
In a way, it's just tough. It's like,
it is tough.
It has to work out really well, and then the artist, like, and then you have all these risks. Like, if it does work out and the artist blows up and it takes 3 years, and even if you have a contract, like, they could just ditch you and go somewhere else. So it has to be that trust, like you guys have with, you know, like Nolan was saying with Kyle, like that was one thing we talked about. They've been together so long, you guys too, as partners, and then it works really well.
It does work. It works really well. And guess what? You know, the worst case scenario is you're not making any money and everyone fucking hates each other. The other best case scenario is you're making a lot of money and maybe the deal isn't right, so you got to fix the deal and you can still remain partners. That's like the best case scenario. But like, the way I look at it, man, is like, you can spend a lot of time working on something and not make any money and then start pointing the fingers of like why it's not successful. The reality is it's not successful because the record's not working. And you have to, as an artist, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, maybe like when I decided in 10th grade to not play football, baseball, or basketball anymore, even though I loved it so much, that I'm not that good. And that's what it is. There are horror stories where people have mismanaged people's careers, but typically the mismanaged career still had massive hit records. And that's why the career was mismanaged. It wasn't because they made terrible records and it was mismanaged. Well, that's like a double negative right there. If you mismanage an artist's career and you don't make hit records, then what are you even doing? So, you know what I mean? I think you have to find good partners. I think major labels are phenomenal partners when the artist is right. And I think there's also independent companies like our company, Independent. It's funny enough, it's called
Great
Independent,
name.
Independent.co.
Right to the point.
Yeah. Big shout out to Gabe. Just kidding. But like, like, you know, the companies like that, you know, we do 70-30 license deals, 5-year license, 5 to 10 year license. And it's really hard for us to make money like that. You know what I mean? So I think we are serving the community of artists by doing a good job. But I guess the bottom line is the music business is hard to make money unless you own asset, and then that can get really tricky.
Yeah. So okay, when you said, I'm just backtracking on what you said, like, you know, you could sign an artist to your company, like independent label, and then they could be making $400,000 or $500,000 a year. How would that like look? Like, let's say, you know, whatever, I'm a producer and I'm like, I want to do this. I want to go all in. Yeah, I want to just like be, you know, I don't need the smash hits, but like that sounds amazing. $500,000 a year to do what I want. Yeah. How would that even like look? Like, what does the deal look like? What are the revenue streams?
Yeah, I mean, I think the revenue streams, if you're an independent artist, a big one of them is streaming. Yeah, right.
So like Russ, I think Nolan and I were talking about that too, just posting screenshots of his TuneCore a few years ago.
Well, dude, it's
shit like that is
sick.
so interesting.
Well, so the thing with him, and he's like hell, and I don't know Russ. I'd love to meet him one day. A lot of people say we look a lot alike. It's like hella funny. I used to have really long hair, so
that's funny. I don't see it, but
when I had like the long hair and man bun fools, but like, yo, you guys are twins. Huh? Anyways, you know, he did it right. This fool made Slap, did a major label deal, kind of had like pretty successful. I don't know if they were hits, but had some pretty big records, and then went independent. And then more importantly, like if he's releasing music on TuneCore, that's just like you're paying to distribute your music. And like versus like you're not even giving away a percentage of the master. Now he's an anomaly like Kanye, or an anomaly like, you know, the rest of these artists, because I don't know him, I don't know his business. I'm totally an outsider, but that fool puts out music like crazy. And I think that when you do that and you have a fan base like that, they're going to consume the music. So, you know, if you can be a guy like Russ who makes a lot of money off streaming, he also makes a lot of money off touring. He's doing big festivals, he's doing big cap rooms. And he's probably smashing merch. So you have like, you know, you have revenue from streaming.
And then because he's independent, he's keeping all or most of that money. Probably paying some managers and lawyers and whatever. But
that's the way that works. If you're an independent artist, that is why the upside is so high. But the barrier of entry is fucking crazy because you got to do everything yourself.
Yeah. Let's say to make $500,000 a year, how many followers or streams or whatever does that equate to?
Sure.
Obviously, there's a range, but like, I mean, just wondering. You know?
So if you're thinking like $500,000 a year, you know, roughly you get about $4,000 per million streams. So you can just do a mathematical equation from streaming and take a look at what does that look like. So what is that? 100? I mean, what is that? Let's do it.
Yeah.
We're gonna sound hella dumb right now. So a million streams. $4,000 for a million streams, so 100 million streams is $400,000.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So
if you're you know, and so say you're doing 500 million streams a year just in streaming, and say worst case scenario you have a distributor that's taking 50%, you're taking home, you know, $250,000 just in streaming.
Why would you need to pay? Oh, a distributor.
I'm just saying, like, say you do a distribution deal.
Because if you were saying if an artist did a deal with you guys, for example, it's 70-30.
It's 70-30. But I'm just using like say there's a partner and it's 50-50 just to make math like hella easy.
Yeah.
And maybe that partner is putting up a marketing budget or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Let's say your takeaway is even 40%, that's like sitting around $200,000. And if you're doing that, if you're clocking 500 million streams a year, you're probably doing some decent touring. So at that case, you're actually making real money.
Yeah.
Like you're actually.
But that's a lot of streams.
That is a lot. No, those are big ass records. And
it's big numbers.
And streaming, I mean, so for our company, Independent, my job besides being co-founder is DSP pitching. So like, because I had a radio background, I know how to communicate really well as a promo guy. And so we have a woman named Genesis that runs the department, and I help out. And like, it's like, you know, with personalized playlists at Spotify, it's like lightweight really fucked shit up, because so it's two-pronged. One, before personalized playlists, getting on like the playlist, Pop Rising, Today's Top Hits, Rap Caviar, any of these kind of playlists. Well, they don't have personalized playlists, but like if you got on that, you're going to start streaming 20, 30, 40, 50,000 streams a day. Now with personalized playlisting, what has happened is me and you could be listening to the same music, but your music taste is different than mine. So the algorithm's going to serve up maybe Bryson Tiller for you, and maybe name another R&B artist.
Chris Brown
for me. But we're still listening to the same playlist, so it splits the streams. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you get like, it pales in comparison. Whereas before personalized playlisting, if I listened to Chris Brown and he was on this playlist, he's going to get way more streams. But what that's done is that's helped artists get on more playlists, because what was happening is there's just hell of like how hard is it to get on like a marquee playlist? It's like there's 50 spots or 100 spots. So, you know, Spotify had to serve the music business and help do that. Anyways, that's just a long way of saying, if you get a lot of streams, you probably have a lot of fans, and you can tour and you can make a decent amount of money.
But how does an artist like get to like, I'm starting fresh, whatever, I'm making what I think is good music, let's say, and I'm like, you know, a producer, like how do they even like start? Obviously TikTok's huge now.
Yeah.
But like what's the first step in like, okay, well, I need the fans, I need the streams.
Yeah.
Like it all sounds like it goes together.
No, it does. So it's actually really funny. Over like COVID, I started a lo-fi producer project that I produced the music.
Oh,
and I
cool.
didn't let anyone know what the name is, and I just started to release it. And
that's kind of a cool experiment because
it is a cool experiment.
It's a cool creative outlet, but also you get to like try things on yourself.
I get to try things. So like as an artist, for me, I'm terrible at social media. I don't post at all on that social. But I had a record that was streaming like 50, 60,000 streams a day.
That's crazy.
You know what I mean? No one even knows it was me.
Wasn't through your connects or anything?
We distributed through our distribution company, but I wasn't like, hey, this is me, by the way. I was like, this is just a tight artist that we're starting to do lo-fi with. What do you think? And I woke up one day and I was getting like 50,000 streams a day. And I was like, what the fuck? It was like in the biggest, lo-fi playlist on Spotify. And I don't even know any lo-fi editors. So this shit just started to work. So what I would say is like, this is what I think. This is like what I think about anyone that wants to start a business, any artist that wants to start being an artist or whatever. All of it, we're all different. What's going to work for you is not going to work for me, I think, and vice versa. I don't think it's one size fits all when you're making art, right? And so I think it's really smart to try all these things. Try TikTok. If you're sick at like making TikToks and you're sick at like communicating through TikTok your messaging, that could really, really work for you.
Yeah.
If you're phenomenal at making music, but you suck at social media, just make the best music possible and release it consistently. I think consistency is key in all these things because you got to try all these different outlets to see what's going to work for you. And I think fools that'll sit here and be like, nah, man, like you have to have like a really sick TikTok plan because if you don't have a sick TikTok plan, you're like dead in the water. I don't know. I mean, I think that you need to be well-rounded as you're developing who you are as an artist and what your voice is. I think you do need to have a footprint on all those things, but you got to figure out what works best for you. So it really is like, I'm like really simple in my approach and things, and I probably oversimplify things, but I think you just have to try a bunch of different shit and see what works for you. Because like for us, we'll get like as a company, our management company will get like a hit record every 2 or 3 years. But those hit records are going to be like the biggest records in the world. We haven't figured out how to get like a touring indie act that can sell 5,000 tickets, whether they have like a hit record or not. But that's not our path.
Yeah,
right?
you guys.
Our path is that we sign artists that are really phenomenal and they'll have a moment and then it's like that. Then it's boom, then it's like that, and it's like boom, it's like that. And I've started to take a look at that and be like, I wonder why that happens. And I just think that's our path. You know what I'm saying? So now we need to figure out the best way forward to continue to grow our business like that. You know,
find new artists. So you're always trying to find new artists.
Always. I mean, we're always open for business.
Are you looking now? Like it used to be like record labels. Artists needed record labels almost to put out music 20 years ago or whatever because they were physically like making physical records and like distributing meant shipping to stores and all this stuff. Now you can go on TuneCore, make an account in 5 minutes and upload a song. And as a result, there's I think 60,000 new songs uploaded to Spotify a day or something. Totally. So when you're looking for new artists, is it about the talent or like you hear a lot of like kids on TikTok that already have 3 million TikTok followers, and then the labels are then coming like, oh, we know this person has an audience. Yeah. So are you looking for like talent musically, or are you looking for like following? Or
I like to try to find a mix of it. So what I've really recognized in most of this, and this is why I think it's really hard, and that's why I don't think that like you can just use statistics as a way to sign a music artist, because it's art, right? Like it's like it's a really hard thing to compound. So I think it's like if you're just looking for only analytics, the music might not be that good. If you're only looking for music and the analytics might not be that good, then you have to dig deeper with the artist and try to figure out why from an analytical standpoint it's not working. Because like people are like, oh well, like I'm an independent artist, and like but like that's not an excuse anymore, because I think that TikTok and like Instagram are fucking phenomenal ways for people to discover you. And just like you said, 20 years ago, there wasn't any of that. You had to go convince the person at MTV to put your video on. Like, you had to go to a meeting with like 10 people and be like, this is why. Yeah. This is why you should do this.
And now it's crazy because you make a TikTok account. If you put 10 videos, like just the algorithm will make one of them at least get 1,000 views.
No, totally.
So you have 1,000 people watching a video, guaranteed pretty much with a brand new thing. Like that's an insane time in history.
Insane. And you don't even got to leave your crib. So what I'm saying is, so when I look for stuff, if I hear like an artist that's phenomenal and then there's like no footprint at Instagram or TikTok, I think that maybe there's something going on that maybe that person just kind of like, if I like say I'm like scrolling Spotify and I hear like the best R&B song I've heard in years. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is amazing. I'm immediately attracted to it. For me, it doesn't matter about statistics. It doesn't matter how many streams it has, how many TikTok followers a person has. Cause I feel like if the art and the music is that good, you can help develop that. But then you have to meet the person because you have to figure out, well, if the music is this good, why don't they have a presence at TikTok or at Instagram or whatever it may be? So you have to figure out, you have to do some digging and have that conversation. And maybe it's just that person lives with their mom and they're still in school and they have a job and they don't have time, but all they want to do is make music. But a lot of times you'll see fools on TikTok that have sick followings, but the music's trash.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not going to spend my time. Like a friend of mine showed me this kid that was like, I think has like 32 million followers on TikTok the other day and was like, yo, man, like he also makes music. And I like listened to the music and I was like, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. This shit.
But you think business wise, it might just be like, even business wise, it might matter more.
He just makes, that's a personal preference. Like some people are just going for the kill. They're just like, shit, 32 million. All right, we're going to do this. I just want to spend my time on music that I actually like. Like I have to like it.
That's fair. That's cool.
I have to like it. If I don't like it, I can't sell it.
Yeah.
I can't come to you and be like, yo, there's no passion.
Yeah. I think it's cool what you said about like people need to find their way to express themselves. And like if it's not everyone needs to be on TikTok. And that's kind of what I was saying with the podcast. Like I was like for a while wanting to do content and I'm just like, it's not me to sit there with the phone like, hey guys. And I never did it. And I was like, but then this is natural for me, like sitting and talking and then we just film it and then we just like, so I get the content from that instead. And it's just like finding that way that's natural for you because you need to keep doing it. Like, I could go do one video and be like, hey, and perfect it. But like, it's not natural for me. So like, I won't do it every day. Whereas this, like,
you could do this every day.
We could do this like all day.
I think that's like a really good point. In life, you should do things and you should try to make money with things that you already do.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, it's not like, you don't have to want to have a conversation with someone if you're curious about business. You just like want to do it, right? So if you're inherently curious about different entrepreneurs and people that make money and have creative businesses, then maybe that's a good business for you to be in because like you just get to talk to people that you like and you put it out and like some people might find value in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then it's
versus like making a weak ass TikTok video.
Yeah, it's like I'm not doing this because I thought podcasting is a good business. I'm doing it because I like the action of doing it. And then it's like anything that comes of it is a bonus. So then it's like when you're in that world, it's like a lot easier to just like, and then you become successful because it's easy to repeat it. So okay, I want to get in the Web3 stuff.
Sure.
Because we touched on it.
Yep.
You guys started Wag Me Beach and then Catalina Whales. So everyone knows there's, bored apes and pudgy penguins. And there's like every animal in the book has been done. And I remember when you guys minted Catalina Whales, it was kind of like the first big one on Solana, right?
Yeah.
The first profile picture collection of an animal on Solana, which is a different chain than Ethereum. Most of these NFT projects lived on Ethereum. So like, how'd that come about? And then also like, what's the music angle with that?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So, okay. So it was like one of these kind of things where, so we got into this Web3 thing initially. Well, let me just back up and say cryptocurrency. Initially cryptocurrency, because like I do jujitsu, I train like 4 or 5 times a week. And one of my friends is a guy named Oleg. Big shout out to Oleg. Oleg had started buying Bitcoin in like 2011, 2012. So by 2015, he was like telling me about like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so me, Josh, and Carlo, being like the degenerates that we are, just started buying hella shit wherever we could because we thought it was cool. And then the bear market hit in 2017, and we were like, oh, jig is up. Let's just go back to like being music managers and running this company, and like it's all good.
How many people did that this year again?
Dude, again, I know. And then so whatever. And we didn't even have big bags. It's not like we were huge bag holders. We were kind of like sucker bag holders, you know what I mean? And but whatever, it was fun. And then so, you know, we got an opportunity. This is going to lead into your question, I promise. So we got an opportunity to invest in a pre-ICO called Superfarm, and Superfarm was a marketplace for NFTs.
ICO, like initial coin offering,
correct? For
everybody that has never heard that yet.
Initial coin offering. And so we invested in money. The money went like 400x, and the vesting schedule was like 8 months. So it was like the most insane scenario.
Gotta love.
So we're like, oh my god! And this is like the bull market's fully back. This is end of 2021. Yeah, and I think end of 2020 we invest in this ICO, pre-ICO. And so what we realized was like, okay, there's a space for guys in music that could sit at the intersection of Web3 and music and technology, and we could help usher in the music business into Web3 because we thought it was a really big segment. And this was back in 2020. So we started a company called Wave 7. It was me, Josh, Carlo, a guy named Michael George, who's fucking legend, and he discovered Martin Garrix, and then a guy named Brett Kernan, another legend who was one of the first employees at Splice. So like we've all been doing this thing for a long time, and so we started to invest in a bunch of different companies. And so I was having a conversation with a guy named Elliot. He goes by Elio Trades. And Elliot was like, man, you know, like if someone comes up with like the first generative music /art NFT, that could be really exciting. That turned into like us internally, me, Michael, Josh, and Carlo sort of having a conversation. And Carlo was like, yo, why don't we start an NFT surrounding whales? Because in the community, if you're a big bag holder, you're like a crypto whale. You're like a whale. You're like a fucking legend. And Michael, and I got to really attribute the launch of that business with Michael and Carlo, because you know, they really took that and ran with that in the beginning part of it, and started the Catalina Whale mixer, which is based on the Catalina wine mixer from Step Brothers. I'm sure a lot of us have seen that. And so it was just like a fun thing to do. Like, yo, let's start an NFT. Let's build a community. You know, the idea of the community is aspirational. It's for people that have been successful and like to live life to the fullest. And so that's how the Catalina Whales were born. Through that process, you know, we minted it at the end of 2021, a collection of 5,500, sold out really fast. And then we were in it, like fully in it. And we were like, wow, this is like extremely cool. And so, you know, we've since then weathered an insane bear market. But, you know, really.
So how much, so each whale, because I minted some, I think, or I either bought them the next day. Yeah. They were like, how much in USD?
We minted, it was
one soul or something, which was at the time $200.
At one time it was like we had $200.
Now it's like $20, but
exactly. So we were able to take that, and we created a whole business around it.
And then at the peak, one whale was like,
I mean, the floor price, I want to say hit like 100 soul.
Yeah,
it was up there, 125 soul.
It was like 10K,
soul.
5 figures per whale.
Yeah, it was sick,
pretty crazy.
It was sick. So boom. So that happened, right? So now we're here. Now we're like in the community. And what's starting to happen as the bear market comes, a lot of founders are just being like, fuck it, pack it up. But what happens is you're rug pulling, right? You're pulling the rug under the people that have bought your NFT, and you're basically not stealing their money, but it's like a really, you know, the Web3 community is like really interesting. A lot of people that are buyers versus founders don't understand what goes into creating a company. It's like creating any company.
Yeah. But I've seen that. It's a funny thing too. It's like, it started as like, everybody's launching animal profile pic collections every day. And it's like, you know, everyone's just trying to hop on because it's going to go up the next day.
Yeah.
And then it starts being, what's the utility? What's the utility?
Yeah, and it's like,
and now it's like this massive expectation where I think it's gone the other way, where it's like, it's not really worth it for a lot of people to launch NFT collections because you're not going to make any money, and then you owe people all these things that they expect, and it's you know, so.
it's rough. Well, it's a full on business. So actually, you know, Carlo, who's, you know, came on as a partner with Indie Pop and Independent, or Indie Pop in the beginning, is now full on running WAGMI Beach, and we have a staff over there that like does that. But, you know, where it kind of comes into play with music is one of our things on our roadmap was to start a virtual group. And that's by going back in the community and picking different whales from the community to be a part of this group. That group is called The Whales, and we just announced a partnership with Def Jam. So Def Jam has signed The Whales, and The Whales are the first like virtual group to be signed to a major label. So that's like really exciting.
It's crazy.
And so now we're just in the process of actually making music. So for us, through this whole process, I can only speak about my experience because there's 4 experiences to speak about. There's Carlo's experience, there's Michael's experience, there's Josh's experience, and there's my experience. My experience through this whole process is like when you're starting a new business, because when we started Web3, this Web3 business, I had never done anything in this space. We did an investment. The investment went fucking nuclear. Then we parlayed that into this other company, WAGMI Beach. And I think at the heart of it, because we're all music guys and we do music really, really well, that's why that was a part of the roadmap. And my participation is, you know, I brokered that deal at Def Jam with Ryan Rodriguez from Fate Work and DJ, who's EVP of Def Jam on the West Coast, and Tunji, who all got the idea.
How'd you convince them that
you
this
know,
was a
it was
good
like
idea
actually
to
really
sign a group of virtual whales?
So check it. It was actually really simple. So, well, not simple. Well, the convincing them was simple because DJ and Ryan were already in Solana. So they were already in the, which was kind of weird, right? It was kind of match made in heaven because most fools are in Ethereum, right? So like you're trying to convince someone like, what's the Solana blockchain? Why this and that? They already got that part. So they were just like, yo, you know, this is a great idea. We took it to Tunji, and Tunji was like, yeah, I love it. And I think it's because I think it's a combination of right place, right time. No one's done it yet, so no one's fucked it up. You know what I mean? And so they just got it. I got to give a big shout to them for getting it because we took it to Atlantic too, and that was our joint venture partner, and they didn't get it. I mean,
and why not just sign the whales to your independent record company?
Because I think we need to give it the biggest platform in the world, and they can do that.
That's the idea of it, is to like make this the first of its kind thing, go big or go home kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's like for us, it's in our wheelhouse because we know how to make hit records and we know how to make records.
So who's actually going to make the music?
So we've brought on an executive producer. His name is TK. TK is awesome. Produced a lot of pretty big records, and so it's like me and TK in the studio coming up with ideas, and then bringing featured artists over, and it's going to be really tight. You know what I mean? It's like, so it'll be like the Whales featuring Kyle or the Whales featuring whatever, and that's the concept of the group. And we think it's going to be, you know, I think as long as we make really good music, it'll be cool.
Yeah, and then basically the connection to the NFT collection is you're going to use. So there's 5,555 whales in existence.
Yes.
And then you guys are going to use those whales from the community as the IP for the group.
Yeah. So you go back in and you basically do there's a staking concept.
Yeah. I just did it with mine.
Oh, you did?
Okay. I got 5. I still got them.
So hopefully you get selected.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, and we'll pull from the community and we'll license that whale. And there's like, so there's a lot of ways you can participate. You know, there's 3 main whales. That would be the group. Then there's a drummer, keys, bass player, so your whale could be a part of the group. Then there's 69 groupies, so one of your whales could be a groupie. And then there's like a road manager, a regular manager. So there's going to be a bunch of ways that you could participate as far as your whale getting
And then
selected.
Do you actually do any work if your whale is selected? Or is it just like, well, I own this asset and my IP is being used and I get cut back a piece of the revenue?
That's how it works, yeah. So you don't have to do, I mean, we're just using the picture.
Yeah. So you use it and then you guys are going to release this on Def Jam and then like it's going to make money streaming just like any other record would or any other album. And then you're going to pay artists and then pay back the whale holders as like the IP users.
Yes.
And so that's kind of how you're bridging the like NFT into a valuable asset.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
And also it's like the reality is like, you know, how that works is, as far as how it's licensed back and all that is still being worked through.
Yeah,
so I don't want to be quoted on that, but
yeah.
But ultimately, what happens is, if the Whales featuring Kyle makes a hit record, the whole collection goes through the roof. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
Because if you're a holder, your shit becomes like that much more valuable, and that's the idea.
Yeah. I was a pretty early NFT collector and collected some, big NFTs, one like record setting one early on 2021. So I'm definitely like on the pro Web3 NFT stuff. But my biggest kind of like criticism of all of it, and that I see now, I'm just like, where do, kind of like similar to our Spotify chat earlier when that flipped, like it hasn't flipped yet.
Yeah.
Where the technology is needed for what people are trying to do. So there's a lot of like membership clubs and I'm trying to figure that too, because I have projects in Web3 and it's like, how can we really use this like where we actually need this Web3 stuff? And a lot of the music NFT stuff specifically, I think the concept of some of these music NFTs where you own an NFT and you get paid a royalty, that's super cool because that's like you can easily buy this piece of a song on chain and then like you get collected back. But I just, in practice, it seems a lot like a lot of them are not, it's kind of like testing these things is in that phase. Maybe it just needs more time.
I think it needs more time. I mean, I think the thing is like a lot of people are trying to use the blockchain for real world experience, like buying tickets or whatever. A big part of it was like, was royalty payments, right? Opulus did that. It was doing that. That was like the Opulus token. And like, but the thing is like here's the catch. You still have to be an independent artist. You can't be signed to a major label and use the blockchain to get paid royalties. I think there just needs to be a bunch of case studies because.
And it's like with like tickets, people have been saying since the start, like perfect use case for NFTs, like tickets to a show or whatever. But the reality is like, everything big goes through Ticketmaster.
Totally.
They're like a monopoly. And like, do they really need the technology? Like, not really. They have a ticket transfer. So you buy a ticket to a show, it gets transferred to you. Like, what does that need to be an NFT? It really doesn't, know?
No, it definitely doesn't. I mean, I think it's like, honestly, man, like a lot of this stuff where it's at right now is like kind of like glorified fan club type vibe. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, if you buy this ticket to a show and you get an exclusive meet and greet or you get something that's cool, right? That's fan club stuff. But when you start getting deep into it, like what is like Web3 and what is the blockchain going to be really used for? I mean, I think again, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's like habits, buying habits and behavioral habits. Like big companies need to adopt this and it needs to change. So I think we're on the verge of it, but I think there has to be a lot more things done because you start to think about it and decentralized all of a sudden becomes centralized really fucking quick. I think it's like, this is like probably a dumb example, but like when I go on OfferUp and I buy stuff, right? And I can like, I have my like Chase account hooked up to OfferUp or my Venmo or whatever. And I buy something and I could get it pretty quickly. That's tight. I think if I could like buy something with Bitcoin on OfferUp, that's tight.
Yeah.
Because then there's no trace of like what's actually happening like in that respect. So I think, but I don't know if that's a big world case scenario. I feel like, look, the fucked up part is like,
because like Apple Pay, people talk about like MetaMask is super cool. Like one of the things with Web3 is like, own the internet, not just look at it, whatever. And that's Web3. That's why there was Web 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But like, to be honest, Apple Pay and like the way you can just do one-click payment, same shit.
Yeah.
Really, like it's plugged in, it's there, it's on your browser, it's on your phone.
Yeah.
So like, we're gonna have to something's gonna have to happen.
Something has to happen. But that's the thing, man. Like it's a huge idea and it's a sick idea, bro. And guess what? People, are finding ways to make a lot of money, which is I think good for just business in general. You know what I mean? If you know what to do when you make a bunch of money, if in the bull run, guys were making 10, 20, $30 million quickly.
Yeah. It's wild.
If you knew what to do with that, you're a legend. If you didn't flop it or you weren't a bag holder and your shit went to zero.
It's easy come, easy go. I've had a few big wins and some big losses.
Well, that's a behavioral thing, right? Like I'm taking this mentorship in investing, like in stocks. Nolan put me onto us with Ryan Leslie, and one of Ryan's taglines, or he says, is like, the attitude should be gratitude, right? So if you get into a trade and you're up $100, get out. Because you just, and so what I really like about that concept is the attitude should be gratitude. If I just made $100 in like 5 seconds, that's a win. But I got to change my behavior because I want to make $100,000 in 5 seconds, not $100.
Yeah.
But if I have that attitude, like the 100 is a win, that 100 is going to grow to 200, then to 1,000, and 5, and 10, and then you start playing with the big boys and the big girls. But if you don't have that attitude, you're fucked. It's like, yo, I've just been opened up to this whole world of understanding the way stocks are being, how that works, day trading and all this stuff. Talk about like the casino, bruh. It's like, it is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy. And so
there's no right answer with trading, right? Like if you, because people say you double your money, take out half, or like things like that. And it's like,
I think it's what works for you.
Yeah. If you're always just like, oh, I made $100, you're never going to get like mega rich. Like the people who like bought a Bored Ape, let's say, and held it all the way through, you know, to the top. Like, yeah, it's easy to be like, why don't you sell it? It's like you started with $200, now it's worth like $400,000. But like their attitude to get them from 200, you know how many people they had to say like, fuck off, I'm holding, to get to that point in the first place. And it's like, it's easy for people to come in and be like, you know, you have this NFT, why don't you just sell it? Well, you could have said that when it went from $200 to $500 or to $1,000. So yeah, there's no right answer. No, that stuff's just interesting. You know?
There isn't, and also, I mean, anyway, so what we're learning in that process is to how I have a really, really more so about having a mental strategy that you're okay with.
Yeah.
Because you're right. You get a Bored Ape and you mint it for like $200 and it goes to 1,000 and you're like, wow, I just 5X'd my money. Sick.
Yeah.
And you sold it. And when that shit went to $500,000, you'd be sick.
Yeah.
But that's the point. The attitude should be gratitude. You just 5X'd $200.
Yeah.
That's a huge win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if you're okay with that, I think it gets further than if you're like, because the other concept is you're just gambling. You're gambling.
Yeah.
And I fell victim to that a ton.
Sure,
bro. Our Bored Ape was worth $600,000 at one point, you know, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, I don't know, man.
I think that's a good place to end it. The $600,000 Bored Ape.
Yeah.
But we'll have you back on. This is a great chat. There's so much more to talk about. So bring you back again.
My boy. Thank you so much. That was awesome.